बोधितां भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन ग्रथितां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम्।
असतो मा सद्गमया तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमया मृत्योर्मा अमृतं गमया आविराविर्मयेधि रुद्रयत्ते दक्षिणं मुखं तेन मां पाहि नित्यं. May the divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the divine consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. The last time during our Gita discussion, we had a chance to look at the importance of Gayatri. And many of you have written to me after that to say how much useful and beneficial you found that discussion. So when we were reflecting on the importance of Gayatri, we saw how vital clarity of mind is. That unless we see things clearly, unless the cloudiness in the mind goes away, only then do we know how to proceed in life. A lot of the mistakes that we make in life, a lot of the judgments that we make in life that go wrong, it's often because the mind is not clear, that we are in a hurry, the mind is confused. Instead of calming the mind down, instead of clearing our head, we just go and take decisions. And oftentimes, those are the kind of decisions that make us regret them later on, when we see that they did not produce the desired result. So getting a clear mind is very important. And Gayatri is a prayer to make our mind clear, to awaken that dhi, that subtle but latent power of spiritual intuition, which is present in the hearts of all of us, but it is kind of asleep, and that needs to be awakened. And that is what any prayer can do. It's not as if Gayatri prayer is itself some kind of a magic. Every prayer, every sincere prayer that comes from the heart will awaken, will bring that clarity. Gayatri prayer is one that is specifically meant for that purpose. And after that, when we looked at verses 6 and 7, we saw how they give the most essential aspects of spiritual discipline. Let me read that verse again, those two verses. Those who worship me, designing all actions in me, regarding me as the supreme goal, meditating on me with single-minded yoga, to those whose mind is set on me, I become before long, O son of Pritha, the savior out of the ocean of mortal samsara. And we saw how here the first person pronoun me refers to the spiritual ideal, or refers to the Atman, the spirit, the divine. What we shall see today are the next set of 4 verses, which give, in a compact manner, the essentials of spiritual life, really. Although this chapter is called Bhakti Yoga, and it's easy to apply these verses in the practice of what we call it the practice of devotion, but if you look at it deeply, we will see that all of these verses are applicable irrespective of which is our dominant practice. And then it becomes clear that this distinction between one yoga and another yoga are not like watertight compartments. They are very porous, very easy to cross over. There will be times when it will not be possible definitively to say that what I am doing belongs to Jnana Yoga or Bhakti Yoga or Karma Yoga. And it's not even necessary. It's not about labeling something or naming something. So these are broad divisions that we see in spiritual life. And so do not try to box yourself in saying that, oh, I'm doing bhakti and this is I'm doing dhyana, as if they are completely separate paths. Because there is a lot of crossovers, as we will see throughout the Gita. So these set of 4 verses, 8, 9, 10 and 11 in chapter 12 are very important. And we will see why. Because they are very straightforward, but they also encapsulate the essentials of spiritual practice. And Krishna seems to give us a choice, and we will see what that choice means. So look at verse number 8. Mayeva mana adhatsva mai buddhim niveshaya nivasishyasi mayeva ata urdhvam na samshayah. Fix thy mind on me only, place thy intellect in me, then you will no doubt live in me hereafter. So 2 things are mentioned here. Mai eva mana adhatsva. Mana is the mind. So place your mind on me. Mai buddhim niveshaya. Place your buddhi in me. Now we have seen on several occasions the distinction between the mind and buddhi. We have seen the body is often seen as the external instrument that we have, through which we are able to carry out all the activities in the world. There is an inner instrument. The body is the visible instrument. There is an invisible instrument. And because it is inside, it's called antah-karana. Antah means inside, karana is an instrument. So in that sense, the body, another name for body, could be bahya karana. Bahya means outside, and karana is instrument. So external instrument, bahya karana, body. Internal instrument, antah karana, mind. And then it's become a little bit confusing because the inner instrument, we don't generally say inner instrument. Normally we just use the word mind. And it's become confusing because one of the functions of that inner instrument is often translated as mind also. So mind is referred oftentimes to the entire inner instrument, but sometimes only to one functionality. So one functionality of that inner instrument is just weighing all the pros and cons. That anytime we have to make a decision in life, we have to choose something, we are choosing between things. We are choosing between different options. And so that function of the mind, which just weighs, just looks at the different options, that functionality is called man or mind. Now, another functionality of the inner instrument is, after looking at these options, to then choose, to determine which is the best option. So both these are functions. So looking at the options is mind, translated into English as mind in the Vedanta texts. And that functionality which chooses, which weighs the pros and cons and then chooses, this is what I'm going to do, that is often called the buddhi. Now both of these functionalities are what are called as thought waves. Again, there is a word in Sanskrit called vritti. Remember, in the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali says that concentration or yoga is really quieting the mind, stilling all these waves so that water becomes still. So these waves inside the inner instrument, waves inside the mind, are called vritti. So both the function of the mind and the function of the intellect, both are different vrittis, different thought waves. Now, understood in this way, the mind becomes an instrument, and the intellect, because it determines, it chooses, it becomes the agent of action. You see, before making any choice, before taking any decisions, we have to have the sense of I. Without that knowledge of I, we cannot do anything. That is why we can't carry out any activity in sleep. Because in sleep, our I of the waking world, has gone to sleep. Well, there is another I in the dream world, and we do a lot of things in our dreams. But that I of the dream and the I of the waking are not exactly identical, because the I of the waking world is now asleep. The dream me can be doing a lot of things. So it's a little bit like, and as we have said often, if the dream me is thirsty and there is a glass of water by my side, this I of the waking world cannot help the thirsty I of the dream world. So they are not connected in this way. Now, in order for me in the waking, my waking identity to do something, I first need that awareness of I. That is why in sleep we don't carry out any activity. And therefore the word buddhi, knowledge, it includes the ego as the agent. Because any kind of a knowledge begins with the knowledge of I first. You see, it's like this. When we become conscious of any object, so when I say this is a chair in front of me, that statement is made because I have a knowledge that this is a chair. I am conscious that this is a chair. So every statement we make in life can be or should be, if you want to be technically accurate, should be preceded by saying, I am conscious. Because unless I'm conscious of it, I won't see anything. Unless I'm conscious of it, I wouldn't be able to do anything. So my self-consciousness is important in order for any activity, any knowledge in the external world. And so this I, as an agent, is included in the activity of the buddhi. Remember, when we speak about the 5 layers or the 5 koshas, the 4th kosha is called Vijnanamaya kosha, the layer or the sheath of Vijnana, knowledge. And sometimes people think that that is the layer of the intellect, but actually it is the layer of the ego as an agent. And just the way as I described it now, in order to know something, in order to choose something, there has to be first the awareness of I. So what Krishna is saying here is that fix your mind on me, place your intellect in me, and so that includes that sense of I. And if I can do that, then he says, then you will live in me hereafter. Now, what is our present experience? Right now, both my mind and my sense of I are very strongly connected with this material world that we see. All the options that we are weighing most of the time, all the decisions that we are taking are related to this world. So the mind is immersed in the world. And so is the buddhi, the awareness, the ego. Because the ego is to connect itself to these choices and then choose what it feels is the best choice. Now, can we withdraw these both my mind, my man, and my buddhi, and put them on the divine, placing it on me, mai eva, on me? If that is done, he says, you will live in me hereafter. You will be filled in God. Now, when we try to meditate daily, when we try to do japa, that is what we are all trying to do. That if I practice japa and meditation for 15 or 20 minutes or half an hour or 1 hour or whatever length of time that we are accustomed to doing, what we are saying is, for these few minutes now, I'm going to withdraw my mind and my ego and and intellect, everything. I'm going to withdraw my inner instrument, which is so busy dealing with this perishable external world. And now I'm going to withdraw them and place it on the divine here. And those of us who have tried to meditate know how difficult it is. It's almost like, it's a little bit like, this is vacation time, and children, the school is over, and the children are now out playing. And they go every day, spend a lot of time playing with their friends. A lot of time children don't go out anymore now because of COVID. It's not always possible. So I don't know whether it's better or worse, but many children are just busy in front of their computers, just playing video games. So whether they are playing out or playing indoors, but doing things, and now the school reopens. And now you tell the children, okay, now the vacation is over. You can still play, but not as much as you used to play before. Now you must spend time studying. And all parents and grandparents know how tough it is, because the mind, as for the children at that time, has gotten used to now going out and spending long time in play or in games. And now suddenly to withdraw it and put it on studies, it becomes difficult. That's more or less our situation. So we are all children, and sometimes we have spent years playing out into this playground of the world. Maybe we have spent lives doing it. And then when we become awakened to spiritual life, something inside us tells us, okay, reduce your playing a little bit, and now go back. Withdraw your mind from this play and put it here. And those of us who have tried to do it know how tough it is, because the mind has gotten used to doing things. We are creatures of habit. And once we form a habit, it's easier to continue doing that. To change a habit is tough. And so now, if we find that we need to now withdraw our mind from the perishable world and bring it to this eternal divine entity here, then we need to change some of our habits. And that's what Krishna is saying. So first thing he says, fix your mind on me, fix your intellect in me, and then you will live in me hereafter. Now, Krishna of course knows that it's not easy. And that's why in the next verse, he says what he calls abhyasa yoga, practice. Read the next verse, verse number 9. Ata chittam samadhatum na shaknoshi mai sthiram abhyasa yogena tato mamichhaptum dhananjaya. If thou art unable to fix thy mind steadily on me, then by abhyasa yoga do thou seek to reach me. Abhyasa means practice. And so, just as I explained, because we aren't used to doing it, it becomes difficult. And now it can be very discouraging. Said, oh, I just want to withdraw my mind. I'm not able to do it. I tried it for a couple of days. It's not for me. Better that I just continue doing what I was doing before. So there is the temptation to give up if we do not find immediate success. And that is why Abhyasa Yoga means don't give up. Even if you find no success, don't give up. Keep on trying, keep on trying, keep on trying. And that is why sometimes it is helpful to read the lives of people who we see are successful. Even people who are successful in the world, in worldly pursuits, we will see that amazing as their success may be, but if we look at their lives and if there is an opportunity to know how they reached to whatever heights they have reached now, we might see that no one, absolutely no one in the world just goes from success to success. There are a lot of failures to start with. And only those who are not dismayed by failure, those who don't give up, those who keep on trying, they are the ones who ultimately succeed. And so if we do not find immediate success in meditation, if we do not immediately go into samadhi the very next day, there is no reason to be disappointed. I must say, I must keep on trying. And that is what Abhyasa Yoga is. Those of you who saw that the TV version of the Mahabharata, the old one which was first telecast sometime in the mid-80s, now a newer version has come recently, I heard. I haven't seen that. So one of the incidents that always comes to my mind is when these 5 brothers, and really these are the principal characters in the Gita story, the 5 Pandava brothers. So when they are young, they are very young, maybe 7, 8 or 9 years old. And so they were, of course, from a royal family. And so they were being trained and in studies and in archery and so on. So there is this beautiful incident. Now, we don't know whether it's historical, but it kind of makes a good point. So all brothers are asleep at night, and Arjuna, he hears a sound. Sometimes, like if you have rats or mice at home, and they become active at night, and so that kind of a sound, some kind of a sound coming from the kitchen area. And so this young Bhima is missing from his bed. And Arjuna sees, what's happened? Bhima is not in his bed. And they're all very young children. They are all 7, 8, 9. That's their age group. So this Arjuna notices that there is a sound coming from the kitchen and Bhima is missing. So in the dark, he quietly tiptoes into the kitchen to see what's happened. And there in darkness, and Bhima, as in the story, he's a very strong, sturdy young boy, and he loves eating. And so Bhima has gone into the kitchen. I was about to say he's opened his refrigerator, but there are no refrigerators then. But he's picked up whatever food was there and was eating in the dark. And then this Arjuna, who is the younger brother, asks Bhima and says, how did you manage to come here in the dark and exactly find where the food is? And now you're just able to sit and able to enjoy that food in complete darkness. And then this young Bhima tells Arjuna, oh dear brother, it's practice. It's practice. And it's kind of a funny little episode. But Arjuna, who has developed a great interest in archery, that word practice goes inside his head. And then we see in the very next scene, Arjuna goes out into the dark with his bow and arrow and starts practicing in the middle of the night. Even when he's not able to see the target, but just by the sound, just by his intuition. And we know, of course, when they grew up, Arjuna became the topmost archer in the world. And that happened because of practice. Again, this is not something, a terribly new idea. All of us have seen in our own lives that every one of us has some skill. There are some things that every one of us can do very well. And we will see that we are able to do certain things well because we have never given up. We kept on doing those things. And then over time, through constant practice, we have gotten better and better and better at doing those things. Exactly the same thing will be true with our meditation practice as well. When we begin, through God's grace, you might enter into samadhi the very next day. That's great. But even if we don't, we just have to keep at it. Keep on practicing. So that is what Krishna says. Put your mind on me, put your entire self in me. But if you're not able to do it, then keep on practicing. Because if you practice, one day you will become successful. Success sometimes can come overnight, or sometimes it can come very gradually. There is no fixed blueprint to this. There is no fixed blueprint really to anything in life, really. So there are cases of sudden conversions, as they are called. People who probably had no interest in spiritual life, their entire life changes, and the very next day, everything has changed for them. So there are these sudden changes. But historically, we have seen that these sudden changes are relatively few. A majority of the changes that occur in life, they are very gradual. So while keeping our hearts open to this sudden change, or sudden change for the better through God's grace occurring in our lives, everything is possible. But be also prepared that every day there could be a tiny incremental change in us, which may not be visible, may not be noticeable, even by us, by a day-to-day basis. And that's why I often say that it is somewhat easier if we look at how we were a year ago or 5 years ago. It may be possible to know how much we have changed. Now, if many of us really are not so used to remembering what has gone by. Well, we do remember a few things which we have not been able to digest or process. But otherwise, the past kind of just disappears. And so some people have found it helpful to maintain a diary or maintain a journal. Because then it may be possible, just kind of open your journal at random, say 2 years ago or 5 years ago. And then you kind of just have an idea about what was going on in your head at that time. So it's not a journal simply about what you ate that day or where you went. And that's helpful, that's useful. But also, it's helpful in your journal to kind of put like what your mind is thinking, how your mind is reacting. So then later on, when you are able to go back and say how your mind was thinking about a certain subject 6 months ago or a year ago, and how your mind is thinking about it now, you are able to see what kind of change has occurred. So people who are used to writing a journal or even writing essays can find it easily. As some of you know, I was editing a journal in India in the 80s and early 90s. And as a part of my responsibility, I had to write an editorial every month on a Vedanta related subject. And so it was not exactly a journal, but in a way it was. Because sometimes when I go back and read some of the essays and articles I wrote, it gives me an idea about how my mind was thinking 30 years ago, 25 years ago. And then those topics, those subjects are still relevant today. And then I see, well, if I were to write on that subject today, would it be exactly the way I wrote it then? Or would it be a little bit different? Or what would change? And that gives me an idea about what kind of changes are occurred. And that's possible for every one of us to do in one form or another. So that is what abhyasa is. Keep on practicing. So Krishna says, put your mind on me, put your entire being on me, and you will live in me hereafter. And that's the thing. If Swami Brahmanandaji, a great disciple of Ramakrishna, he says, give your mind to the world and it will destroy it. And give your mind to God and you will be just filled with bliss ever after. So it would seem a no-brainer where our mind should be put. The challenge in life is this dichotomy, this tension between the world in which we are, with which we are engaged in, which it is easier to say just don't think of the world, but practically it's not possible. And then to put our mind on God, whom we have had no experience of so far. So that's tough. We are experiencing the world, but don't think about it. But think of God, whom you are not experiencing. That's the challenge. And therefore you need practice. So first we have to begin with the Shraddha, with faith, that even though I'm not experiencing God, but God is there. So the first spiritual experience, if you like, if you want to use the word experience, because it is not something merely intellectual. It is not something merely a feeling. So it's not a feeling, it's not an intellectual conviction, but deep down you feel, again, I said it's not a feeling, so you can't even say you feel. It's not intellectual conviction, so you can't say you know, but deep down, I don't know what verb to use, but deep down you know God exists. So asti means exists. And it's possible that some people might think of God in very personal terms, and some people might think about it in very impersonal terms. And we have seen at the beginning of this chapter, it really doesn't matter. Think of God in whichever way that comes naturally to you. But the first genuine spiritual experience is God exists. Because only if God exists, then there is some chance that I will see God. But if I'm not even sure whether God exists or not, then all this talk about realizing God or seeing God become pointless. So what is the test? One of the tests is that no matter what activity I'm engaged in, no matter what my mind is thinking, no matter what work I'm doing, no matter how I'm relating to everyone and everything, God, or the presence of the transcendent spiritual ideal, will have some role to play in everything that I do or think or say. It may not always be like in your face right there. You don't have to be saying God, God, God all the time. But somewhere in the corner of my heart, the presence of that spiritual reality will always be there. Now in our life we know that for many of us, it is there, but it's not there always. Oftentimes, when we go to a place of worship, or when we are meditating, when we are praying, or maybe when we go on a pilgrimage, that feeling is a little bit stronger. But then, when we are engaged in other activities in life, then it just disappears. So, right now, we are going back and forth. There are times when we feel it strongly, there are times we feel it mildly, and there are times we don't feel it at all. Now, the proportion might vary. Maybe I'm able to feel God's presence, that God is there. Again, I'm not talking about seeing God. I'm not talking about divine visions. I'm just saying just this thing that God is present. Maybe at present, 24 hours in a day, maybe I remember that 10 minutes. Maybe rest of the time, that I just don't remember it. And so that's one way to see how often I remember that. A second way would be also, how often do I feel that I am just by myself? Now, most of us, when you are around with family and friends and even our virtual friends, when you're speaking with someone over the phone or in a video chat, you're never going to feel you're by yourself. But nevertheless, many of us do feel a sense of loneliness, a sense that, well, there's no one for me. There are people who feel that way. Now, if I know God exists, if I truly feel that God or the divine being is infinite, everywhere, then the feeling of loneliness will go away, or at least will be decreased considerably. But how can I be lonely? Even if no other human being, no other animal, no other pet, nothing, there may be no one whom I might be able to call my own, but God is always there. The divine is present right now. Wherever any of us is sitting, we are just enveloped by the divine, inside and outside. That is the kind of awareness, if we have all the time, everywhere, that is what is meant by saying, you shall live in me hereafter. And just think about that wonderful state. There would be no stress, no anxiety, no worry, no fear. There is God inside me, there is God outside me. What is there to fear? So that is the state that can come. And in order to reach that state, Krishna says, abhyasa, we need to practice. And so the next thing, so first I said, God exists, asti. Only if we say God exists, then there is a question of, well, if God exists, I want to see God. We know, when reading the life of Sri Ramakrishna, his hunger to see God, hunger to have the vision of the Divine Mother. And then we can look in our own hearts and say, how much hungry I truly am for God vision. How hungry am I for spiritual experience? Because sometimes we do complain and say, oh, I haven't had any experience yet. I haven't seen anything. But we should also ask, how badly do I want to see God? How hungry am I? If I'm not hungry, then the chances of me seeing God become less. Sri Ramakrishna gives that example about a little child who is sitting in a room surrounded by toys. And mom is busy in the kitchen, and so she has to cook, she has to do a lot of other chores, so she has kept all these toys around the little baby. And the baby is enjoying and playing with toys, and so the mother is able to do all her household work without any disturbance. And now and then, the baby cries out and said, oh, mommy, or something like that. And the mommy looks from the kitchen and then doesn't go immediately. because after calling out to her mom, the baby then again starts playing with the toys. So calling out to mother now and then, but not so much worrying about it if mother doesn't come and she's busy with the toys. But then Sri Ramakrishna says, a time will come when the baby really wants to see the mother. And she'll call out to the mother and start crying. And the mother will say, well, play with the toys. And she doesn't want the toys. She throws all the toys away and starts crying. And then the mother realizes, no, now I have to go. I have to go and take the baby in my arms because she's not going to remain quiet again. It's a beautiful, beautiful imagery. So everything that is keeping us busy in this world with all these different toys, some of them are living, some of them are non-living, but all are toys in that sense. And we think of God once or twice a day, and that time and when we call out to God, we are very sincere. It's not as if we are not. But we also have a lot of things to do. So we plan, well, I'm going to now meditate for 15 minutes because after that I have got to do 1, 2, 3, 4 things. And so, now, again, I'm just speculating. I don't know what God says or thinks when we do, but using that example of Ramakrishna, it's possible that God might say, oh yeah, this good child of mine is now doing japa and meditation. But after 10 minutes or 15 minutes or half an hour, the child is now again going to get busy with other toys. So I don't have to go right now. I can wait. But when, through constant practice, we will begin to not remain satisfied with this playing with the toys, that's when the heart will start crying. That kind of intensity we saw in the life of Ramakrishna and all the disciples and all the great saints. When that intensity comes, it is then that awareness that God exists, the next experience comes, you begin to experience God directly. But in order to experience God, we must first have that initial Shraddha that God does exist. So abhyasa. So these two verses give us that very important insight. And then Krishna says, Abhyasepi, look at verse number 10. Abhyasepyasamarthosi matkarma paramo bhava madarthamapi karmani kurvan siddhim avapsyasi. If also thou art unable to practice abhyasa, be thou intent on doing actions for my sake. Even by doing actions for my sake, thou shalt attain perfection. So if I'm not able to keep my mind and buddhi on God, because my mind is getting distracted by my other concerns, my other activities in the world, so I'm not even able to practice putting my mind on God, then Krishna says, okay, then wherever it is that your mind is dragging you, to whatever activities it is dragging you to, look upon those activities as an offering to me. That you are doing those activities for my sake. And as I have said earlier, this is completely inside. If you are working at a workplace, let your boss think that you are working for them. But in your mind, you know that I am doing it out of love for God. So in this way, if I can spiritualize every action of mine, doing it as an offering to God, which is really basically what Karma Yoga means, even through that, Krishna says, you will attain to perfection. So first, he gives us an option. Give your entire being to me. If you're not able to do it, practice. If you're not able to even do that practice because the mind is constantly dragging you out, then wherever it is dragging you, whatever it is impelling you to do that activity as an offering to me. The one thing is not said here, but it's obvious that those activities which can be offered to God, can be offered to the divine, have to be ethical and moral activities. So I can't say, oh, my mind is dragging me now, I want to go and cheat and do some criminal activity, and then I can come and continue my meditation, and I'm doing that criminal activity as an offering to God. Chances are it won't work. Well, almost, not almost, I'm certain it won't work. So, offering everything to God implies that that activity is good. What we understand by a good activity according to dharma, which is truthful, which is honest, and so on. That's kind of understood. And then finally, he says, if you are not able to do even that, look at verse 11. Ataidapyashaktosi kartum madyogamashritah sarvakarma phalatyagam tataf guru yatatmavan. If thou art unable to do even that, then take refuge in me, abandon the fruit of all actions, being self-controlled. So he says, even if you're not able to do even that, then you just completely surrender to the divine. Abandon the fruits of all actions, and then that way control yourself. You need a self-control because the mind would want to have these fruits of actions. And therefore, without that control, I wouldn't be able to abandon everything at the feet of God. I wouldn't be able to surrender myself. So to surrender, I need two things. First, I need control, because the tendency of the mind is to grasp, and surrender means giving up. So I need control, but I also need some amount of ego reduction. As long as there is a feeling, oh, I can do it, full surrender will not come. A total surrender comes only with a complete sense of helplessness. When I know that I cannot do anything at all, that God alone does everything, then it becomes so much easier to say, well, I completely surrender. So ego reduction is also very important. Now, it might seem as if all these options that Krishna gives, because the way it is worded, well, if you cannot do this, you do that. If you cannot do this, you do that. If you cannot do this, you do this. It would seem the last one should be the easiest. But if you look at them carefully, none of them are easy really. They are just different ways of doing it. So for some people, one thing might be easier, for some something else, for some something else. So do not think that these are like progressively more difficult or less difficult. It's more helpful to see that these are just different ways of connecting with the divine. And whichever way works best for us, anyway, we'll still need practice. So whichever of these things we tend to do in our lives, we will need practice, because only practice will lead to perfection. So in these 4 verses, 8, 9, 10, and 11, Krishna gives a set of practices which are not limited to simply bhakti yoga, not simply limited to devotional thing. As you can see, you can apply them, and these might work in whatever ideas we might have in our heads about jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, karma yoga. So don't limit yourself to any kind of a box. But whichever spiritual practice we have, you'll find an echo of it described in this set of 4 verses. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. First question. Can you please clarify, Buddhi exists only in Vijnanamaya Kosha and Manas in Manomaya Kosha? Is there any overlap? These koshas, we have to understand them. So do not think of these koshas as some kind of containers. In one container is mind, the other container is buddhi. It isn't that. It's more helpful in visualization. The idea is that our first sense of the self is the body. Because they say, this is who I am. But then when we begin to think, oh, is this all that I am? And when we look inside, begin to reflect, we find inside this body there is a living force, that life. Because when the body is dead, nobody thinks of it as a person, because the person is gone, the person is left. So there is someone else inside who is the real person, not just the external body. And so that living principle called prana, that seems to be the real me. But then if you start looking further, then find, oh, within this prana, there is such a thing as the mind, that repository of feelings and emotions and all of that. That is the real me, the more lasting me. And then you begin to reflect further that beyond that is the sense of I, the ego as the agent. So the buddhi, as I said, in this Vijnanamaya Kosha, although the word Vijnana means knowledge. And as I said, knowledge is primarily, the first basic knowledge is the knowledge of I, the I sense. And buddhi is the determinative faculty, so I as the agent. So that seems to be my core being. And even beyond that, then is this what is called the Anandamaya Kosha. Translated literally would mean the blissful sheath. But the bliss again there is really the sense of I as an experiencer. Because in deep sleep state, when only that all the others, the body and the mind are completely at rest, in deep sleep everyone experiences a sense of bliss. And that is the only time when this innermost layer or kosha is acting independently. And that is why how it gets the name blissful sheath. So its ego as experiencer is the last sheath. Ego as an agent is the Vijnanamaya Kosha. The mind, the prana, and the body. Now, it is not as if these things are like in these layers. So there isn't anything like that. It's just that if you look deeper inside the body, the prana is revealed. If you look deeper inside the mind, if you look deeper inside the two ways the ego manifests. So in that sense, that is how the word kosha is used. So you cannot say that buddhi exists in this and the mind exists in that. That language doesn't work here. Next. Robbers used to pray to goddess Kali before going to robberies. Is that practice then useless for spiritual growth? How about kings praying before going on conquest? When kings, when they prayed to the divine before conquest, they were not really praying for their spiritual growth. They were praying because they wanted to win in the war. When the robbers went and prayed to Kali, that time they were not like, oh, I want to be liberated from this world. No. They were praying because they wanted to have a successful robbery. So clearly, these things are not, the prayers in those contexts were not meant for spiritual growth at all. Are they completely useless? From a spiritual growth point of view, I would say they're pretty much useless. On the other hand, I would not say that they are completely useless, in that God has some place in their lives. Even if they are seeking winning a war or a successful robbery from to seeking divine assistance for those things, they could as well have done it without bringing God into the picture. So the fact that the divine played some role leaves open the possibility that in future, when they begin to see things more clearly, either through Gayatri or something else, when they begin to see things more clearly, the presence of God, which already is there in some form in their lives, will help them advance more quickly. So in that sense, it is not completely useless. But we need to distinguish between praying for worldly ends and praying for spiritual growth. They both are prayers, but of very different kinds. Next, verse 10 seems it could be taken to mean to do more rituals to attain me. But that is not the point, right? Verse 10, what does verse 10 say? Exactly. Mat karma paramo bhava madarthamapi karmani kurvan siddhim. Mat karma, do works for me. No, it doesn't necessarily mean only rituals. In fact, even rituals that are done, they are not done for God. Everything that we do, all the puja, etc., that we do, it's not like God is dependent on my puja or God needs my puja. Well, one of the definitions of the divine is divine doesn't need anything, divine doesn't lack anything. So even if I'm doing ritual, it is for my sake. Even if I'm work that I'm doing, it's for my sake. It's all about me in life. Now, either I can do that all about me for this little me, or I can say, no, in this me is the divine. So all about me, but all about this divine in me. So can I change my attitude to life rather than saying it's all about me, but all about the divine in me? And then it doesn't take too much brains to recognize that the divine in me is not different from the divine in you. So then if I say everything is for the divine in me, it really means it's for the benefit of all. So yes, you are right. It's not restricted to rituals, because even the rituals are done not for God. Next, Swamiji, you mentioned different ways in connecting with the divine, but in times of tragedy, sadness, and dark times in our lives, which we all face at times, concentration level goes down. That's very true. That's the challenge in life. When things are well, when everything is just dandy, most people don't even think of God at that time. But if people do, then it might be easier to meditate when the mind is calm and there are no worries. But when we are anxious, when we are stressed out, when we are worried, then it does become difficult. And that's the challenge, that even in such times, can I pray to God? Can I concentrate my mind? And that will occur, as I said before, if I have that Shraddha that God exists. And not only that God exists, but God can solve my problem. God is all powerful. So if I know God exists, if I know that God can solve all problems, then in fact, in times of tragedy, my concentration level should increase, should become even more intense. But for many of us, it actually goes down, which shows that my Shraddha needs to be deepened. My Shraddha needs to be strengthened. That I do believe that God exists, but that thing, that faith hasn't become strong yet. Next, is verse 11 referring to Karma Yoga? Yes, indeed. Sarva Karma Phala Tyagam. So, Karma Yoga, this is definitely Karma Yoga, there's no doubt about it. So, there are at least three ways. They are not mutually exclusive that are included in Karma Yoga. So, here this verse mentions about Karma Phala Tyagaha. surrendering the fruits of activities to God. And that's definitely a part of Karma Yoga. But also, another aspect of Karma Yoga is surrendering the work itself to God. So you are offering not just the karma phala, but you are also doing the work as an offering to God. And then the third aspect is surrendering the karta, surrendering the person who is doing the work. So, a karma yoga would mean I'm offering not only the fruits of my actions, but even the action I'm doing out of love for God. And me, the agent of action, the one who is doing activities, I'm saying, even this being who is doing the work, I'm surrendering. So the doer, that which is done, and the effects of that which is done, all the three are offered to God, and all the three are included in Karma Yoga. Next, knowledge involves the intellect. Feeling involves the emotions. Is there a dimension beyond intellect and emotions that is independent, that subsumes impressions and awareness? The dimension beyond this is the spirit. The spirit is the eternal witness. Without the spirit, without the divine, without the Atman, without the self, neither emotions nor feelings can exist. Because the basis of existence is the divine. And because the divine exists, I'm able to even become aware of the emotions and the feelings. So the answer is yes. The dimension beyond that is the spirit. And spirit really, although because I'm using the same language in your question, the spirit is not just a dimension. The spirit is all that exists. So spirit is the only thing that exists. And emotions, feelings, and everything else other than the divine is a kind of a shadow, a kind of a reflection. But the present reality is the shadow has become more real to us than the real being. I mean, how odd it would be. Let's say I'm just going for a walk and it's a nice sunny day and the sun has come up and I'm seeing the shadow. Now a lot of time we see our own shadow when we are walking. And we are not surprised by it. We are not frightened by it. It just seems like a natural thing. A shadow is a natural thing. But I know this is me and that's my shadow. And that would be a very natural experience. Now, what if I think that shadow is me and I'm the shadow? Does it make sense? And then everything becomes distorted. Because if I see my shadow or my reflection in a water and I think that's me, then I'm going to think I'm drowned, I'm underwater. Correct? So my perception will completely get distorted. Now that is what has happened. Every object that we see in the world is really my shadow or my reflection. Reflection of the spirit in apparently inanimate, non-living things. And I begin to get identified with those things, forgetting the real me. That's how everything has gotten distorted. So, spirit is not just a dimension, spirit is the only reality. Next, with the crisis going on in India and other places, our close people are getting impacted. What should be our attitude, or how should we look at it from a spiritual lens? Well, the first thing is, whichever way it is possible for us to help, we should do so. In fact, in the last few days, I know several people have been trying to find, is there any way we can help people and the organizations in India who are trying to meet these challenges. It's the terrible situation there. And so that's the first thing, of course. As much as it lies in our power and as much as it is possible, we should try to help people who are suffering anywhere, really. First thing. Second thing is, in addition to what we could do, we can, of course, all of us pray. Because our perceptions have become very material centered, oftentimes people are able to see only the help that is given materially. And sometimes people discount the effect of prayer. But people who believe in prayer, the power of prayer, know that although it's very subtle, although it cannot be measured, although it cannot be seen, a lot of good does and can occur through prayer as well. So in addition to whatever help we might be able to give materially, we should certainly pray. And in Buddha's discourses, we read about sending loving and compassionate thoughts in every direction, in east, west, north, south, and that should be a part of our practice. Every time before you do your daily meditation and japa, you begin with prayer. And prayer, do not think that it's simply just kind of a practice which will just create some good feeling inside. No, it does help. So when you pray for others, know that even through prayer, if it is sincere, if it comes from the heart, you can help even in that way. So that is what we can and we should do. A comment. This was very reassuring. I often find it difficult to reconcile the need to work, where you have to use your mind to create solutions to difficult problems. This can also be done as an offering. I'm so happy that you found this teaching very helpful, and it can be helpful for all of us. Yes. Verse 12 seems to be the easiest, but is it not the hardest to practice, as seen from the life of Girish Chandra Ghosh? Absolutely. And that's why I said, although it might seem, because Krishna says, if you can't do this, if you can't do this, so he's not really saying, I'm giving you something easier. He's really saying, I'm giving you something different to do. So, yes. So it's not, I wouldn't say it's the hardest. What I would say is it's different. Yes, I agree with you. In fact, if we are not ready for a certain practice, then that practice is going to be hard. So hard and easy are sometimes relative terms. And the more we practice, that which is hard in the beginning may become easy later on. But yes, from the example of Girish Chandra Ghosh in Sri Ramakrishna's life, it's very true that surrendering oneself fully, giving our power of attorney, as Sri Ramakrishna used to say, that's easier said than done. It appears like a very attractive option to give complete responsibility to God. Well, then I say, well, I don't have to do anything, but it's really tough. Next, doesn't tamas cause avarana, that is covering, and rajas cause vikshepa, that is distortion, keeping us always in maya as they are part of our very nature? Well, tamas and rajas are not really part of our very nature. Our nature is divine. So tamas and rajas have kind of pretending to be a part of my nature because of my state of ignorance. And that is what maya means. So because I am in maya, I feel as if tamas and rajas are parts of me, and clearly because of maya, the truth gets covered and some other reality gets projected in its place. And the practice is therefore to break through this veil of maya. Now, the good news is that the maya does not and cannot cover everything. It's a little bit like, see, the divine is infinite. Maya is not infinite. So a finite entity cannot cover an infinite entity. But it can hide most of it. It's a little bit like the clouds. The clouds can hide the sun, but no cloud is as big as the sun. So the cloud can cover the sun, but the cloud cannot stop the light of the sun entirely. That's why even when it's a cloudy day, we still know it's a day, it's not the night. Because no matter how thick the cloud is, some light does come through. Exactly in the same way, even though we are in Maya now, this Maya cannot cover the divine fully. Some light of that divine does come through. Now, what is that light? That light is what makes me aware that I exist. Because if the light of the divine were completely covered by Maya, I wouldn't even know that I exist. And so, I know I exist. Now, I don't know exactly that I am divine. So, my divine nature is covered, but my existence is not covered. So, Sat Chit Ananda, the Chit and Ananda part, the consciousness and the blissful aspect, that seems to be covered by Maya. But Sat, that I exist, right now I know. The only difference is, I now say, I am a human being. My experience is not that I am a divine being. So, I am a human being. Now, in this sentence, I am a human being, I am. That's reality. That's true. I am. Where it gets distorted is a human being. And where a correction is needed is replace that human being with a divine being. The I am, that remains constant. So, I am a human being, I am a divine being. I am, that's the truth. So, you're reminded of what we read in the Bible. I am that I am. So, I am is a reality that we are already aware of now. So, we cannot say that we are totally ignorant. We have some knowledge of our existence. But that existence is little bit covered, which is why I do not know exactly who I am. Okay? When Krishna says, put your mind onto me, is that saying God's name or asking to see him or just sitting trying not to follow all the worldly thoughts? What does praying mean? Well, it can mean any of these things or all of these things. There isn't just one definitive answer to it. The answer is that this mind, can it be put on something that is beyond this immediate world that we experience? Do I even believe that there is anything beyond what my mind and my senses can grasp? If I believe that there is something more to this life than what I am seeing and what I am thinking, then that is where my mind should be put. But people who believe that there is nothing beyond, whatever exists is whatever I see or whatever my mind can imagine, then that is not really what Krishna is meaning. What Krishna means is really I said before about having the conviction in the existence of the divine. And that existence really means existence of something more than the world that I am experiencing right now. Because a purely materialistic perception or idea is that this is all that there is nothing beyond. Now, that doesn't seem to be Krishna's suggestion here. Can the COVID crisis be understood as Mother Nature's reaction against problems humans have caused? Example, overpopulation, cruelty against animals, the environment, etc. Well, some people might interpret it that way. See, interpretation is different from the objective reality that my mind and senses grasp. So what we do see objectively is that here is this virus which is causing havoc, which is causing death, destruction, all kinds of problems at various levels. And we can ask the question, why is there the virus? Now, a purely objective way of answering that question would be, well, why do viruses occur? How do viruses occur? I don't have answers to all of them, but I'm sure there are experts who might be able to say, how come these some radical protein molecules go about and how are they created, and we know what they do. So there is an objective answer to why these viruses occur. But some people might want to find a more what sometimes gets called as the Adi Daivika. So Adi Bhautika, there's a word in Sanskrit, Adi Bhautika means from the things and the materials and objects and people and beings in this world to find a cause from among these. Adi Daivika means to find a cause from some supernatural, from a supernatural realm, not directly perceived by the mind and the senses. And there we might say then, of course, it's a Mother Nature's reaction, etc. And then a third way of interpreting could be a thing called Adhyatmika. Adhyatmika means it's because of me, that because I have done something wrong, which is why all this has happened. So that way people interpret things differently. It's either because of me, or is because of some higher forces, or is because of something happening in the world. And all of those interpretations are possible. And one interpretation might satisfy one person, and some other interpretation might satisfy. Like interpretations are. There aren't any interpretation that I know which are like universally accepted. So there's always going to be difference of opinion about why certain thing happened. Even about how that thing that has happened can be removed, there is an unanimity. We know, even the reality right now is that vaccines, a good number of people, I imagine, majority I hope, do believe that these vaccines are helpful in protecting us from them. But we know there is no unanimity. There are other people who are resisting that. And so that's just the way things are in life. People don't seem to agree on everything, and there's always going to be differences of opinion. Having said that, I can give my opinion. Get vaccinated. It's always helpful. And I think the more the number of people who get vaccinated, the quicker this problem will go away. The more the resistance there is, the longer it's going to remain. So it's not only for our own good, but also good for the rest of the world. So at least one way I can help the world is by getting vaccinated myself. So do not think of vaccination as simply something for your own good. It's also for the good of your family, your neighbors, your friends, and everyone. Again, that's my opinion. And again, there are always going to be people who will disagree with this way of thinking. So thank you for all these questions, and we shall continue with the study of the Gita. And as I said, next week we will look at this very inspiring list that Krishna gives about the kind of qualities, the kind of things that I need to develop in myself in order to be an ideal spiritual seeker. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto us.